Lou DiBella, how are you doing today? It's really awesome to talk with you.
Good to talk to you, man. I'm just chilling. It's 4:30 on a Friday afternoon.
You can't beat that. I know, right? You can't beat the weekend. Yeah, I'll get right into it. So I became really familiar with you through my boxing aficionado friend Ange Baker. Shout out. I told him I had a Flying Squirrels internship, and he was like, "Holy crap, I know who they are because of Lou DiBella." So it's kind of full. That was 2013, so it's kind of full circle to be talking with you right now about boxing and baseball a little bit.
Well, as we say at the Squirrels, once a squirrel, always a squirrel. So you're still technically part of the family,
That's right. I even went to the Green
and you
Jackets.
worked for us for free. So
Exactly. That's
it's
right.
appreciated.
I even went to Augusta, the Green Jackets. You might know Tom Dellinger, Brandon Green. They went to Augusta from Richmond, so I was
I
even
know
down
all of
there.
them. Yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah,
our
oh yeah.
guys.
All right. Yeah, exactly. I was curious before I kind of get into the boxing and a little bit of baseball. How boxing, whether it's boxing, baseball, film producing, how did it all kind of come together? Like, did you think that this would ever be your life? I don't know, back in the day. How did it all come together for you?
How did it come together for me? Some of it was luck, but I knew what I wanted to do pretty young, and I was like when I was in college, I was disc jockeying, and I had a pretty popular show on college radio, and I knew I wanted to get into some aspect of the entertainment business. I didn't really know how, honestly. I wasn't a connected kid. I'm a kid from Brooklyn. My dad worked for the government. My mother was a teacher and a poet. So like I wasn't I had no connections in the sports or entertainment world. But the two things that always excited me were sports and entertainment. The two sports that always excited me were baseball and boxing. And now I sort of run two minor league teams with a lot of help of great people, and I'm going to be technically inducted into the Hall of Fame at a ceremony this summer in boxing. So it's been a good ride. As a Dead would say, and our old friend Marty from the Squirrels would say, "What a long, strange trip it's been."
Yeah, that's super awesome. Yeah, congrats on
I
the
mean, I
Hall of Fame.
started. I knew I wanted to get into sports entertainment. I didn't really want to go to law school. I
Yeah.
got. I took the LSATs because I didn't know what I was going to do. I started interviewing for jobs as a disc jockey, and I realized how horribly they got paid, and
Yeah.
I didn't have that passion to be a DJ enough to make 19,000 a year in Tallahassee. So I took the LSATs and the business boards, and I did well on both of them, and never would I have thought I'd wind up at Harvard Law School, but I went to Harvard Law School. But from my, before I ever walked into Cambridge or the law school campus, I knew that I was going to use that as a sort of like a jumping point to try to get into sports or entertainment. And honestly, I thought I was president of the sports and entertainment committee at Harvard. I helped, a labor law professor write one of the great sports textbooks, sports law textbooks. I thought I would get some really cool entertainment job coming out of Harvard Law
Yeah.
School. And I did it. I got a big Wall Street job for a lot of money, but I didn't love it. But I worked with some really smart people. I was at a place called Sullivan and Cromwell. But I worked with some really smart people. They're cool people. A lot of them are still my friends. They knew I really wanted to get into sports, and they knew I was probably interviewing on the side when I was there. But I was pretty dedicated when I was there, and I was a good guy. So I think they liked me, and they tolerated the fact I was constantly looking for another job. But the way I wound up in boxing started with an interview in baseball. There was an opening for the head lawyer for the Yankees, the general
Oh,
counsel of the Yankees, and there were a bunch of people interviewing for it, and you had to go in there and you interviewed with the then Yankee brass, and you went through a whole process of interviews, and they narrowed it down to like three people. And at the end, I was one of those three people. I was also significantly younger than the other two people. I was 29 at the time, and I thought I had a pretty good chance because I really clicked with all the people at the Yankees that I had spoken to. But like the day of the interview, I get a call, and it's Steinbrenner's secretary, and she sounds like someone died, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Well, I'm okay, but I'm not sure you're going to be in a second." I said, "Well, what's the matter?" And she's like, "Well, the boss was looking at the three resumes of the guys coming in today, and he saw you were still in your 20s, and he thought he said like, wish him well, but tell him he's like too young for this job, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then she said, look, I don't know if this helps you, but one of the other two guys, and I think he's the one who's going to get the job, was about to he told me he was about to take a job at HBO Sports if he didn't get this job. So HBO Sports, immediately in my head, it was like Seth Abraham, HBO, Larry Merchant, Jim Lampley, like, you know, immediately like the buzzer started going off in my head. And I was already dressed to like go to an interview, and I had extra resumes in my pocket. And this was before, like, you know, a full decade before 9/11. So you could sneak into a building. You know, I just went to the HBO building, snuck past security, planted myself outside the general counsel's office, sweet talked the secretary, and, you know, begged her to get me in to see the guy. And then the guy had heard me begging from inside his office, thought it was funny, and he called me into his office, and we had a nice conversation. Sent me up to Seth Abraham's office, and, you know, I'm an Italian kid from Brooklyn. Seth's a Jewish kid from Brooklyn. You know, my favorite sport's baseball. Seth's favorite sport was baseball, and our next loves were boxing as a sport. So it sort of was, you know, we clicked, and then that was a Friday afternoon, and I got a job offer on Monday. I took an enormous pay cut, but you know, it worked out well, and I had some fun for a long period of time until I made the mistake of telling a senior Time Warner executive to go fuck himself, and then I had to but actually, you know, that in some ways that was the best thing I ever did, because I never would have been this involved in minor league baseball if I never told Jeff Bucas to go fuck himself. Doing that you know, sort of like changed my direction. I still, because of the way I worked with HBO for a number of years after I left the company, I was still in boxing, but I wanted to spread sort of the breadth of what I was doing. So I started a production company, which has done some really cool things. And then the Squirrels came. And then when I thought that there were guys, like you worked with these guys, I think like Brendan Porter and Murphy and Ben Rothrock. And I had a lot of people working for me that deserved a more of an opportunity. Right. And Parney, who was like my sidekick, deserved more of an opportunity himself. So that led to us buying the Montgomery Biscuits, where now two of the younger executives in Richmond who came up through the ranks and really were top notch got to go to Montgomery and run their own business under us. So, you know, that's sort of how that's been the path, man. That's been the path.
That's awesome. Yeah, even the Yankee connection, I didn't even know that part. I actually was just I solo trip to Cooperstown to see Jeter's induction last year, so that's pretty cool with your just how you got to this point. I get it, like the whole connections, and just you never know. You start here, you go elsewhere, you never know how it's going to end up. So that's pretty cool to hear.
You gotta, if you have something you know you want to do, though, you have to keep it right there. And you have to make some moves to make it happen. Now, moves can happen in different ways and mysterious ways sometimes. If you love something enough, if you have a passion for it, shit can happen in weird ways. But you have to be focused on, where do I really want to be? Like, I was making incredible amounts of money as a young lawyer in New York. I mean, I was doing really well. And like, I could have stayed in that and probably made maybe more money than I made in the sports world. But I wouldn't have had the experiences I had. I wouldn't have traveled the world. I would not have had lunch with Nelson Mandela because he wanted to discuss boxing. I wouldn't have met princes and kings and presidents and you know, writers and artists, and like so many people are into boxing, and sports is sort of a way to, you know, unites all of us. But it's also through sports you meet a lot of interesting people, you know. And I met a lot of interesting men and women through boxing and baseball.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
I've also met some real shits, but that comes with the territory.
It's been about a decade and some change since Sergio Martinez shook up the pound for pound rankings among, you know, the top contenders not named Pacquiao and Mayweather. So kind of like becoming like the man in the middleweight division also comes with like that certain luster, that's historically prevalent. So can you speak to what that meant for Sergio at the time and how ecstatic you were on the night of his one-punch knockout of Paul Williams?
Yeah, man. If you go on YouTube and you look at that fight, which was the second Sergio Paul Williams fight, I think I could have dunked the basketball. I jumped so high and I was out of my seat. The funny part was, well, let me give a little background. Sergio Martinez looks like a movie star, probably still is a movie star. He's back now. He's made a comeback because Sergio can beat mediocre and even he could beat a lot of the pretenders in boxing. I don't care what his age is. And he came out of retirement. I would have wished he retired, but he's fighting at a high level right now. He looked like a movie star and he was a great fighter, but he had bad knees. He picked up boxing late and no one knew who Sergio was in his early 30s. And they were sending around DVDs of Sergio, that tells you how long ago it was, to promoters around boxing saying, Samson Lukowicz tried to get him signed with a bunch of people. And he said, this guy is a superstar. Take my word for it. And he had a bad loss on his record, but they paid him $500. He took it on no notice. And it was like sort of bullshit. And I saw the DVD and I was like, wait a minute. Like this guy has star written all over him. And I'm like, wait a minute, he's going to be a champion. And, I signed him and Samson and I did really well. And Sergio had an incredible career, a Hall of Fame career. It was hugely important for Sergio back then because he was unknown. The Paul Williams knockout, he got robbed mercilessly. When Sergio Martinez fought Paul Williams the first time, it was a horrible robbery. I mean, it was so clear that Martinez won the fight, and he didn't get the decision. And then Martinez simply devised a game plan and saw an opening, saw there was a problem in the armor of Williams, and had a punch that he knew he was going to knock him out with. And in fact, one of my favorite little boxing stories is Sergio always used to laugh. Like I always had a ritual. I would like be a nervous wreck. I'd probably say like a part of a rosary. I'd have a scotch, but I would look like I would be a nervous wreck the day of a fight. And he'd always, the day of the week of the rematch, he's like, Maestro, don't worry. He goes, I got this. And then in the dressing room before the fight, he handed me a piece of paper. He said, put this in your pocket and don't open it until the fight's over. And what it was a prognostication, an exact pick of how he was going to knock him out in the third round. And it happened in the second round, the way he said it would happen. And it almost happened in the first round because he timed that same one punch, kind of put all your leverage into it situation. And I happened to be sitting in a weird angle, like I was set up where they were in the ring. I was looking literally into Paul Williams' eyes. And there was this millisecond before he started falling and he fell like a tree, like bang. Yeah. But there was a millisecond where you could see in his eye that he was standing on both feet out. And that was the second I jumped out of my seat because without him falling, I knew the fight was over. Like I knew that he wasn't going to get up from that.
Yeah.
Paul Williams was a great fighter and then had that unfortunate motorcycle accident that ended his career, but he was a great fighter. Martinez had some great fights. The fight with Chavez was a great fight. He had some great fights. But, he had bad knees when he started his career in the States. And the bad knees, I mean, he still had a Hall of Fame career, which is remarkable, but he could have been an all-time great. I mean, he is an all-time great, but not where he could have been. He could have been a pound for pound all-time great with better knees.
Yeah, I actually watched that YouTube highlight earlier before we were talking today. Saw that knockout, so I know what you mean when he just felt like a tree, like you knew
just
he wasn't going to get back up.
Bang.
Yeah. So kind of shifting to the TV side. So like not long ago, HBO, Showtime, or the superpowers that monopolized the big fights, and then Al Heyman came along with Premier Boxing Champions. So when this happened, a lot of fans were excited about that, but HBO folded, decided that boxing wasn't what got people to sign up for HBO anymore. So do you think that excuse was predicated on the Al Heyman changing that standard? And do you think that basically the sport isn't a net positive or negative in viewership with this change in standard?
It's not as big as it was, the sport. And some of that's change in media and the way things work. I mean, a lot of boxing's on streaming services right now, and you have to subscribe to this streaming service. A lot of boxing's on pay-per-view, and not all of the pay-per-view product that is being offered now is the kind of pay-per-view product you might have been used to as a kid, or I was used to my years at HBO or my first years as a promoter, where only the biggest fights sort of were pay-per-view, and then niche fights were pay-per-view. Right now, almost all of boxing is niche. And that's one of the reasons you're seeing so much of it streaming. I mean, I think PBC, Heyman's thing, that brand, I mean, they're on show. They pretty much control most of the programming on Showtime, and they have stuff on Fox. I think it's important. The eyeballs that they get are important. Top Rank's exclusive with ESPN. I think, not so much ESPN Plus fights. I don't think they do anything to grow a fan base, but it's important to have primetime boxing on ESPN. DAZN's offering pay-per-views, and DAZN has a subscription service. If you're a hardcore boxing fan, you're going to subscribe. I subscribe. I'll bet money that you don't, and that most of your friends don't, because it's more niche. It's more hardcore. No, I don't think boxing's in the shape it was in the 80s or the 90s. I don't think it's in the shape it was in the 60s or the 70s, or certainly not before the 60s, when it was one of the biggest, two biggest fight sports in America, and then maybe three biggest. It was like boxing, horse racing, and baseball for most of the 20th century, until you got past you got into like sort of the 60s, and you saw started to see the emergence of football, the emergence of NBA, the growth of NBA, the growth of basketball. I mean, so stuff happened then, but boxing was a dominant sport for most of the 20th century, and it's clearly a niche sport today. The other problem is all these exclusivities, ESPN's exclusivity, DAZN's exclusivity, PBC's exclusivity. The best don't fight the best. So, and by the way, the best don't fight the best, and we're so marginalized as a niche sport, the general public doesn't really know who the best are.
Yeah.
Most of boxing's champions could walk through Times Square. No one would know who the fuck they are. There are exceptions, but not a lot. Right now, to a large extent, Canelo Alvarez has been carrying boxing on his shoulders. And he's a Mexican crossover star, but he's really sort of been, he's, the marquee guy. And then the heavyweight division's been interesting with, Wilder here, Joshua in the UK, Fury, who's right now the man. Clearly, the Gypsy King is the man. He's going to fight another Brit, Dillian White, in a fight that sold 85,000 tickets at, I think in 3 hours, and they could have sold 85,000 more. I mean, boxing can still captivate the world with the right fight, but we're not doing the sport any favors. And there were so many shitty decisions. It's too unsafe. I don't want to get into it, but there are a lot of problems. I don't really want to ruminate on them at 5 o'clock on a Friday, but there are a lot of problems.
No, I get that. No, when I think of niche sport also, in addition to maybe boxing, I'm thinking like even the NHL these days. I mean, it's on ESPN Plus, which is cool, but NBA, NFL, baseball, when it's not locked out, dominates, the typical major sports these days.
Yeah, but what's look, the reality right now is boxing doesn't even have the combat sports category.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question UFC is bigger time, better demographics, more considered to be more must-see programming by more casual sports fans. Right now we're not even the number one combat sport, and we should be, because I do think I've grown to accept and like and actually follow MMA to a degree and UFC. Yeah. But boxing at its best, there's nothing better. But too often we're not at our best.
Who are the fighters to look out for the DiBella Entertainment stable these days?
Charles Conwell, 154-pounder, was a U.S. Olympian. I just did a co-promotional deal with a new promotional company called Probellum. They do a lot of global stuff. And I think that Conwell is a great fighter. I think he could beat most of the 54-pounders. Al Heyman has sort of hoarded the best 54-pounders, but I think Conwell would beat most of those guys. I think he's emerging. The big Uzbek, the Olympic gold medalist, Bakadir Jalalov, he's like a monster, 6'9", moves like a lightweight. I mean, has incredible agility, huge power. I mean, just remember the big Uzbek, because he's going to be heavyweight champion at some point. And then I have a lot of young fighters that depends on what part of the country, but I have some undefeated heavyweights. I have I have a very good stable of fighters right now.
That's
George
awesome to hear.
Kambosos, who I think will be announcing something in the next couple of weeks for his next fight, which will be in a soccer stadium in Australia in June. But we'll have an announcement coming on that.
That's awesome to hear. And yeah, I think in general, I just think it's cool. Like, even as a casual observer, I was watching a video on YouTube last night. You were doing an interview with somebody from like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And I don't know, like, you successfully entertain at face value, as what promoters do, but you see him like a really cool guy, just a chill guy in general. Whether, you know, and
I
like,
mean, I think that, like, look, man, I've been in boxing for 33 years. You're gonna have
yeah,
fucking haters, and they're gonna be
yeah,
people you don't like. There are people that aren't gonna like you. Not everyone's gonna love you, and I think if everyone loves you, you're doing something wrong.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I think I am sort of an interesting guy, man. You know, and I think
yeah,
I consider myself to be a cool guy, and I think what you see is what you get with me. And I think even a lot of people, some of whom don't like me, would concede that, you know, what you see is what you get with me. I don't really hold my punches. I try to be a nice enough guy, but if I believe something or I think something, I'm not shy to say it. You know, to some extent, that's been the key to my success. It
yeah,
may have been part of the reason I left HBO, but it's still, in the big picture, is the key to my success. Because I think if I didn't have that kind of attitude, I never would have rose through the ranks at HBO. I never would have convinced Seth and Michael Fuchs, who was the chairman of HBO back when, to do Boxing After Dark. I wasn't going to be able to convince Jeff Bucas and the guys that were in the finance department of HBO to give me more money when I could make something better. You know, I think part of it was having a little bit of, you know, balls, you know.
yeah, for
So
sure.
I think it's like, but I think with me is what you see is what you get. I think most of my Squirrels family and Biscuits family would also agree with that, as would the people that have worked with me in boxing for decades.
Oh yeah, being authentic is definitely, you got to be that. Yeah. Before you wrap up, yeah. I guess you get to Richmond pretty often, or as often as your schedule allows, I assume, for the
Well, I mean,
Squirrels.
yeah, I mean, I don't get off there often enough. I will
Yeah.
be there for opening day. I'll be
Nice.
there this year. I plan to spend some extended time at some point in a couple of weeks when we have a homestand, or at least be there for a week at a time or something. I want to spend more time. I mean, the pandemic also made me baseball hungry.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And what are your? I mean, I can imagine what your thoughts are on the Major League Baseball lockout, but I can't wait for
Yeah,
that
I
to be
mean, I
over.
can't. I have a lot of thoughts on the lockout,
Yeah.
some of which I can't say.
Yeah.
What I will say is this: baseball's part of the fabric of this country.
Yeah.
You know, the players and the owners, everyone has to get together and get this done. It's not a good look with fans. Fans love baseball. The players love baseball. You know, no matter what people think, the owners love baseball. And for the good of baseball, everybody's got to get this done on short order. And I'm just hoping for the best. In the meantime, there's minor league baseball,
There
and
is. I know.
we open at home at Riverwalk Stadium in Montgomery on April 12th. We open at home at the Diamond in Richmond, Virginia on April 12th. And I'll be at one of those games.